Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into a deeply fascinating foundational mystery of human civilization. We're looking at how modern societies relentlessly try to trap fluid, dynamic human behavior into rigid, inherited rules. We often think of our modern world as this great place of endless social mobility. But what if the exact opposite is happening right under our noses? What if fluid economic classes are actually hardening into closed, rigid structures? Okay, let's dive into this. This is the core cognitive dissonance we're going to unpack today. From day one, we're taught to believe that we live in a pure meritocracy, right? That success is simply a matter of individual hard work and raw intellect. But when we actually look at the sociological data and historical patterns, a much more complex picture emerges. It begs the question, are we actually witnessing the subtle, modern reconstruction of a caste system? To figure that out, we've got a clear roadmap. We'll start with the class versus caste divide, look at the historical scribe monopoly, and explore how privilege gets encashed. Then we'll break down the actual tools of calcification, examine asymmetric stratification, and finally, talk about the durability of caste. Let's get into it.
Part 1. The class versus caste divide.
To really understand how a society transforms, we absolutely must establish our baseline definitions, and there's a fundamental chasm here. A class system, that's primarily economic. It offers this fluid promise of social mobility based on achieved status, meaning you can theoretically move up or down based on your market opportunities or, failures. A caste system, however, is the rigid reality of a scribe status. It is strictly determined by hereditary birthright. It creates a completely closed system where vertical mobility is structurally impossible. Throughout this explainer, we're exploring the exact mechanisms of how that fluid, achieved class subtly turns into a rigid, closed caste over generations.
Part 2. The scribe monopoly.
The thing is, this isn't just a modern phenomenon. There's this deep historical impulse toward elite closure, where privileged groups intentionally hoard knowledge to maintain their grip on power. Think about it. Back in 3000 BCE, ancient Mesopotamian elites known as the Tup Shahu intentionally hoarded the massive complexities of cuneiform writing. Their education wasn't for public enlightenment. It was exclusive cultural capital meant to make them strictly indispensable. Jump ahead to the 13th century, and you've got the Patisha system bottlenecking medieval texts. And today, in the 21st century, we see a modernized scribe monopoly. We have cloud royalists hoarding digital execution behind closed AI systems. This historical parallel really proves that elite closure is a universal human impulse. It's an urge to monopolize society's operating system and restrict access to the fluid classes below.
Which brings us to Part 3, encashing privilege as merit.
Let's shift from ancient history to modern sociology to see exactly how this elite closure operates today. We're drawing heavily here on sociologist David Moses' brilliant analysis of Tamil Brahmins transitioning into the global IT sector. And to do that, we need to demystify a heavy sociological term, casteless merit. When a mobile economic class solidifies its power, it takes traditional caste capital, things like historic land control, literacy monopolies, and deep social networks, and brilliantly encashes it into modern capital. Think prestigious degrees or high-paying corporate roles. Once that conversion is complete, the elite represents their inherited structural dominance as purely objective individual talent. They literally rebrand inherited advantage as casteless merit.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the rebrand actively masks the reality of that success. Take the global IT sector. In 2007, Amartya Sen gave a speech to NASSCOM, where he attributed India's IT success to a historic respect for distinctive skills rooted in the caste system. Now, this creates a powerful myth, sometimes jokingly dubbed Iyer-Iyengar technology, after Brahmin caste titles, where IT success is viewed as this inherent, almost genetic, intellectual trait. But researchers like Mossy point out that this entirely masks the real process. It hides the highly exclusive family connections, the immense network investments, and the historical privileges that actually enabled that success. The privilege is hidden behind a very convenient mask of pure, objective merit.
Part 4. The tools of calcification.
So how exactly does a group pull this off? Well, there's a systematic playbook for how a fluid class successfully locks its doors and calcifies into a closed caste. Step 1, as we just discussed, is converting traditional caste capital into modern professional capital. Step 2 is establishing elite endogamy. The upper class calcifies when it restricts marriages strictly to those within the exact same socioeconomic and cultural tier. This creates a completely closed pool of wealth and cultivated apartness. And step 3 is absolutely crucial: strategic disinvestment. When a field, say state bureaucracy or medicine, becomes highly regulated or too competitive because of democratization or affirmative action, the elite actively withdraws. They just pack up and move to new, unregulated frontiers like global IT or venture capital, where their networks give them a fresh monopoly.
Part 5. Asymmetric Stratification.
This brings us to the absolute climax of this sociological theory. What does society actually look like once this calcification process is totally complete? Sociologist Satish Deshpande calls this asymmetric stratification. And honestly, this is the ultimate elite privilege: invisibility. The top tier of society secures total anonymity. They get to operate as the general category. They present themselves as unmarked, casteless, modern individuals of choice. Meanwhile, the lower classes are forced to mobilize politically based on their specific, ascribed identities just to claim basic state resources. The elite gets to be universal, while the subaltern remains hypervisible and permanently marked.
And this brilliantly illustrates the divide we're talking about. Within the exact same economic system, we have two completely divergent realities. The elite enjoys this unmarked status, justified by the slick concept of casteless merit, and they work in global formal economies. On the flip side, the subaltern, the lower classes, are trapped in a marked, hypervisible status. It's justified by ascribed identity, and they are overwhelmingly relegated to the informal or manual labor economy.
To really ground this, let's look at some concrete research from sociologist Dana Kornberg. She studies what are called transactional pathways in Delhi's waste economy. She followed a woman named Salma, who is an informal Muslim waste sorter. Through decades of absolutely grueling manual labor, Salma actually saved enough to build a concrete home. Now that is mobility, sure, but it's deeply constrained mobility. Salma's informal pathway involves door-to-door collection and manual sorting, and it's heavily marked by her caste and religious identity. Formal recycling, on the other hand, is managed by dominant caste members utilizing heavy machinery and lucrative government contracts. So even if two people work equally hard, they are navigating entirely separate, unequal institutional pathways. The rules of the game are literally different depending on your inherited mark.
Finally, Part 6. The Durability of Caste.
To truly grasp why this system survives so stubbornly, we have to connect caste directly to the broader history of global capitalism. And the year 2001 is really pivotal here. At the World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa, anti-caste and Dalit activists made a profound, game-changing argument. They completely disrupted the convenient myth that caste is simply some religious custom, unique to India. Instead, they argued that globally, caste functions exactly like race. They aligned it with racialized unfreedom, showing that both systems are upheld by dehumanizing violence and discrimination specifically designed to protect economic power.
So the crucial takeaway here is that caste and capitalism are deeply, deeply intertwined. As historian Rupa Vishwanath writes about colonial India, rights over land and rights over hereditarily unfree laborers were one and the same. Pariahs were essentially property. When we build on the insights of Black Marxist scholars like Cedric Robinson, we learn that capitalism doesn't just operate on free, impersonal labor. Not at all. It relies heavily on unfree, marked, and deeply categorized labor to generate its massive profit margins. By rendering inequality as just a custom or a religion, elites have historically dodged scrutiny while retaining their iron grip on cheap labor.
We've covered an incredible amount of ground today. We've seen how a fluid, mobile class solidifies and calcifies into a rigid caste through endogamy and monopoly. We've seen how sheer privilege is elegantly translated into the myth of casteless merit, and how modern capitalism relies on these asymmetric, marked pathways to function. So I want to leave you with this final, truly provocative question to ponder. If elite privilege in our society is perfectly masked as casteless merit, who is actually allowed to succeed? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the structures around you, and I'll catch you next time.